Welcome back to the Performance Prescription Podcast. Delighted to be here with Preston Smith again. Preston, hope things are going well with you. How have you been?
Yeah, pretty good over here. Excited to get a chance to talk to Lynn today. Little intro. I know I've been on here once before, but my name is Preston Smith. I'm the regional sales director here at Target Continuum. I've had the chance to connect with Lynn a couple times now, and I'll just say she is incredible. A real wealth of knowledge in this space. I'm excited to kind of dig into her experience a bit more today.
Likewise. Well, let's welcome Lynn Robbins, our guest today. Welcome to the show.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I always like to kind of check in with Preston in terms of what he hopes to hear from our conversation with you, Lynn. Like, what's maybe an area that you hope to dive into with Lynn on today's show?
Yeah. Lynn and I have had a lot of conversations so far around critical and post-acute care and just kind of what that looks like in healthcare today and kind of that relationship between the sales team and marketing and how they can kind of work together. So excited to, take a deeper dive into that and really see how that's evolved and kind of what the future looks like for post-acute critical care.
Well, Lynn, let's give you a chance to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your experience, kind of who you are and what you do.
I am a marketing communications professional first and foremost with a passion in healthcare and have spent probably 20 of my 25 plus years in healthcare marketing. So corporate communications, it kind of goes hand in hand. And so, as Preston mentioned, I have both acute care background as well as post-acute or home-based care, not necessarily, senior living facilities, but specifically home-based post-acute care. And so the world is changing as we know it. I mean, how many healthcare conferences have you guys been to where it's like everything is changing? It is constantly a work in progress, and AI being introduced into our world, especially within healthcare, really changes how things are delivered and how we need to appear to our consumers who could be our patients. So I have worked both, as I said, in hospital health system, both nonprofit and for-profit. My last experience in acute care was with HCA in the New Hampshire market. And then I have worked in and out of home health, skilled home health, and hospice care, both for profit, most recently with Traditions Health, and nonprofit with Community Hospice and Palliative Care in Jacksonville, Florida.
Lynn, to start, I kind of want to zoom out for a second because in some of our conversations, I think this is where a lot of this shift starts to happen. Are you seeing any shift in how patients or families specifically are kind of finding that home-based care today, or is it still primarily referral driven still?
I think this definitely goes to our discussions, Preston. It is both and the both and is getting much more amplified and enhanced. And so marketing and sales, while we can be under the same umbrella, correct, in a lot of organizations, it is a very unique relationship in the post-acute care environment. Sales is pretty traditional on the ground, working referral sources day in, day out for those referrals, those leads that they can nurture into admissions. However, marketing's role is not only to enhance and arm our sales professionals on the ground and their leaders with very important comprehensive tools to tell the story about our brand and what we offer our patients and their families on the ground. But more importantly, we're their partner in driving in leads and being a lead gen, as opposed to, well, thank you for the nice brochure. That is old time thinking, especially in 2026. And so one of the things we did at Traditions Health was really in the marketing realm. Under my leadership, we developed an inside sales department to work alongside the external sales department and to work within our digital marketing strategy to take the leads that were coming in digitally, online, and through a variety of digital marketing channels, and then into a HIPAA compliant platform, which I want to again stress how important privacy is in healthcare marketing, and then following up those leads and not just, warmly talking to them, but actually working through the referral and handing it to the account executive once it was ready to roll and be admitted. So you're really integrating and you're really making a difference when you're not a global, but a national organization who is doing national marketing on a digital level and doing it in a HIPAA compliant fashion. And you are now partners. We're not just a cost center as a marketing team. We are a growth engine. And that is what we need to be to move forward into 2026, 2027 and beyond, especially in the home-based care world. I have to say on the acute side, that has been a much easier growth engine discussion. They've been doing a lot more around tracking ROI and marketing efforts, both digitally and classically. I think home-based care has kind of sat back and done it the old way over and over again.
Lynn, I love what you said there about being partnered because it does seem like a lot of the time those teams can be kind of siloed out. And I'm always preaching turning marketing from a
Mhm.
cost center into a revenue generation center, revenue generation engine. So I think that relationship is really
Absolutely.
important. And it feels like even small shifts there can have a really big downstream impact. But I want to stay on that point because it feels like this is exactly where things break down a little bit. How should marketing and sales specifically be
Mhm.
working together in home-based care? Because it feels like I said, teams are often operating separately.
Yeah, they can often operate under the same leader, right? But that leader may be more skilled on the sales side. They usually come from a sales background, not always, but usually. And so that chief growth officer, sometimes they're called chief revenue officers, are often the folks that manage the day to day between sales and marketing. And so it's really incumbent upon folks like myself and the teams within marketing to work with their chief and help them to understand, educate them on the value of not just tools in the hand or digital downloads, but actually driving growth through our work with paid search, programmatic. We can be talking about paid social sometimes around something like palliative care where you're educating, and that's a top of funnel discussion. But most of all, it's really just getting the education going with your leader if they don't understand it, and then building rapport, trust, and most of all, a shared CRM that works to reach our consumers who are usually marketing's audience a bit B2C, but also B2B, and working collaboratively with our sales team members so that they feel marketing's not doing a touch point that we're not aware of with our referral source. We're integrated. So we're meeting on a weekly basis, we're messaging together on a weekly basis, and then we're taking our calls to action on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and I'm curious within that, where do you think the biggest disconnect is happening today between marketing and sales? You mentioned a little bit about CRM data, some of that communication. Would you say that,
Yeah.
just showing how success is measured is kind of a big disconnect as well? Or I guess what are the main pillars of that for you?
Well, I talk about things like kind of a three-legged stool for like a drum set. So there's operations, right, that does the day in, day out work of a post-acute care company. And then there's sales, the front-facing, on the ground, getting out to referral sources, really sometimes even community sources. And then there's marketing, who should be integrated across both of those individual entities, and we become a solid stool that work together to bring on more and more patient volume. And that's because we aren't afraid to be transparent. We aren't afraid to share a CRM that works, and we can all really count on it to be a source of truth. And then operations can count on us to provide the very best information so that they can be responsive within a 24-hour time period to a sales based lead or a marketing based lead. But the three entities are working together transparently to do so.
Okay. So in terms of, we talked about kind of what that biggest disconnect is. So I'm going to present you with a magic wand. So if in your ideal reality, what good looks like. So if sales and marketing were truly aligned in this space, what would that actually look like in practice when that alignment is there?
Well, there would be a sense of collaboration and not necessarily competition. One of the things we learned very quickly when we started to build the inside sales function within marketing was that at first it was viewed competitively. Like, why are you taking our leads? Versus we are handing off these leads so that and they're nurtured into referrals so that you can take it to the next step, which is admission. And so we're not in competition, we're in collaboration. And so then taking it one next step and utilizing a shared CRM where did this referral come from? We need to be able to account for that. And it should be a good thing to account for it as an online or digital referral, as opposed to, my gosh, it didn't come from, Jane Smith, account executive in McAllister, Oklahoma. And so it is both are good, right? So we're handing this off, they're following up. It's something they didn't have prior to our campaigns. And now we can build out that CRM and have trusted information that tells us, okay, how is our digital campaign working? Is it actually truly producing that growth engine ROI, or is it not? And then we can, in real time, you know, really, we were making fun of the word pivot the other day. We can pivot to what is a better approach. And one of those things is sometimes you get to a point with paid search or some other component of digital that you've reached a plateau. And so you need to move to something that might be a little bit different that would reach your targeted consumer who could be that patient that needs us. And then, you pivot to that and then it comes in. And, something we found that was really amazing was working through YouTube with pre-roll. And a lot of that kind of tool base allows you to tell your story a little differently. And so you don't stop doing paid search, you don't stop doing the other digital tools, but you start to think through, okay, how can we really enhance what we're doing? And then you learn to tell your digital referral based lead story to your sales teams, and they realize how important it is. And at the end of the day, we were able to say at the end of 2025 that we were in the top 5, if not the top 2 of referral sources for the organization. So that to me is a growth engine.
Absolutely. You mentioned ROI and what that looks like, thinking of executive confidence. When leadership asks what's driving that growth, how confident are teams in that answer? Is it still something that's data driven? Is it still somewhat anecdotal at this point?
Well, you have to build your dashboards, right? You have to have monthly dashboards that really do show the exact attribution, Preston. So that's what we did. That was our chief growth officer was really instrumental in us moving in that direction. Our teammates did a fantastic job building out those dashboards. So it wasn't just like digital ROI that was very easily shown and where those service lines were that we're seeing the most growth out of our digital campaigns, but also, what were the tools that the salespeople were using? What were those that were most effective? And how do we build out more of those sales tools to support them because they're working in their referral based community that they serve? So it's a both and, but we definitely did monthly dashboards that our CGO took up to our CFO and our CEO. And quite honestly, at the time that I worked at Traditions, we were owned by a private equity firm, and they took those monthly dashboards to the folks that were on the board. So you have to tell your story.
Got it. Absolutely. And if there's one thing marketers know how to do well, it's storytell. So that's really awesome. And that's kind of where I want to shift a little bit here is we're in healthcare marketing constantly talking about doing more with less, budget shrinking, having to prove data out and ROI. For you, if marketing could clearly show which efforts were driving admissions, revenue, how does that kind of change the budget conversation?
Yeah, it really does. Right? So when you can show direct attribution and ROI, you can make your case through your monthly dashboards or through an annual, kind of retrospective right before budget season to say, hey, this is where we ended up. And we brought in this amount of business, and it's broken down by service line. And we feel, given what we've learned over the past year and what our partner, we had a really great partner who worked with us, a digital agency, and what we think could work even better because A, we're tracking it appropriately and HIPAA compliantly. B, we're listening to the consumers, so utilizing, say, a call service and listening to them and learning from them, and then doing a really good job at projecting based on the year behind you as your benchmark, what you know is very possible. And so you focus on that and you ask for more because you've shown that you can actually be the growth engine you said you could be based on the benchmarks you've actually illustrated through your monthly dashboards.
It's really interesting.
Well, you have to win, and this was something that would happen to me on a relatively regular basis. Our CFO would say to me, "Why do you need?" In my case, I'm going to use a number. It won't be the actual number. Why do you need $100,000 a month for digital marketing? I don't understand. And we're struggling over here. Let's just say we're struggling with supplies because we're an enterprise-based organization. So supplies are a big part of the cost. We also had fleet, big part of our cost. So if they see those real tangible assets being squeezed and they're looking at you saying, what are you doing with that $100,000 a month? And maybe we want to tighten those belts a bit. And if you've been doing a really good job working with your partners, also working with your sales partners to tell the stories, and your inside sales department can also be part of that story because they're in it day in, day out, you can actually overcome the question and then show them the reality because data for a CFO is truth and data matters.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And as I mentioned, I don't think enough people are kind of thinking about it that way yet. And it does tie directly into what you mentioned earlier about that patient behavior shifting. As more patients and families are starting to research care online, how does that change the relationship between sales and marketing from what you've seen?
Well, it makes it really important that sales and marketing understand that it isn't just the referral source who talks to the patient, but the patient, just like they did in pharmaceuticals, right, and durable medical equipment and biotech, they are researching topics. Now, nobody researches hospice unless, of course, they are a family member or somebody is in that critical need. So you have to be mindful of the fact that many times consumers are kind of dipping their toe into healthcare topics to research. And that's where you've got to capture them and help them along. And I think one of the things that we're learning, we've all kind of built a lot of campaigns organically as well as paid around search engine optimization. But we have to be very mindful of AIO. And so that's kind of changing the game and helping us tell the story to sales on the importance of the relatability of our organization, the authority of our organization, and the trustworthiness of our organization. And that we are showing up, you know, very, very intentionally in this research, whether it's skilled home health care, palliative care, home care itself that isn't skilled, or hospice. And they can trust what they're getting when they're doing their searches. And then we are there not just because we did SEO really well or paid search really well, but because we're becoming more and more the relevant authority that is trustworthy and can be brought into kind of the top feeds around the service lines that consumers are looking at. And then the consumers go back to their provider and say, hey, listen, I know you told me go with ABC Skilled Home Health, but this is not what I'm seeing. So I'd like to consider Traditions Health in my case.
And I think we could wrap up today's show by asking you if you had any final thoughts or anything else we hadn't talked about yet as far as any of these topics. Just any other keys or insights that you'd particularly like to mention to those who are in the space, to colleagues who are nodding their head in agreement with all the insights you've shared up until now? Anything else you'd share with them?
think relationships are critical, and we have to really work within our organization to build relationships and trust. If they're going to see us as a partner, sales see marketing as a partner, and vice versa, and operations, as I mentioned, that three-legged stool in front of the drum set, rhythmically putting together something beautiful, then there needs to be trust and transparency and shared data, whether that is, a CRM, which is a discussion for another possible podcast, because that could take the whole thing, or our dashboards, because sales are held to dashboards as well. And so how do we do that? And then how do we say to our operators, hey, listen, we heard your capacity concerns. We heard you're worried that, we're maybe bringing in too much business for the capacity that you have. So how do we pivot there so that we can support you while still reaching the patients that need us?
It's a great place for us to wrap up. And yes, it does sound like a part two would be very appropriate. We can dive even more into the CRM side and a few other topics there. But Lynn, thanks so much for joining us today and giving us so much to think about.
Well, thank you for the opportunity and privilege.
Thanks so much, Lynn.
Thanks.